you won't ever need to use it. And, if you're writing poems, you probably would want to know as much English as you could. If you weren't, maybe you'd never use those words, but it's still good to know them. And, especially I'm finding like I studied jazz pretty extensively and all that kind of stuff. In LA, I've never used it ever since being out here. It's been pop, rock, those kinds of sessions. But it's still good to know it for that one session when it comes into play.
There will be the day.
Yeah, there will be the day. And it's like a carpenter's toolbox. You want your toolbox to have every tool in it that you could ever possibly need. Maybe you don't ever need to use it, but I think that's kind of where, at least for me, theory was and all of those kinds of things. And I think the other thing is that I had a professor of mine once tell me that, you can have knives and everything in your kitchen, but that doesn't make you a chef. That just means that you cook, and it's out of necessity. Owning a guitar maybe doesn't make you a musician. It's the things that you do with it that make you a professional at it and give you that rite of passage. So I think it's, if you can, it's always best to do it. Put everything in your toolbox that you can so that you're always prepared no matter what.
Thank you. The road to getting this information and getting this skill set can be long and arduous, or it can be very quick and exhilarating. Here at Miracosta, we try to not use the word just. We take that out of the vocabulary. And the other three words are if I only, because everybody's looking for the Swiss Army knife to be able to solve the conundrum of trying to break into the industry, trying to do what their dreams are telling them to do. What tools do you think are absolutely necessary for the modern musician? So I'd like to use the word, if I only had this, and if I just got this, what would they be?
Just
in spite of.
Sorry, Nate. Go ahead.
Okay.
John.
Once again, it goes back to you've got to have what you have between your ears. You got to have your brain, and you have to listen. You really have to listen to what's happened before you, and it'll give you an idea of where, we talked about finding a certain niche, finding out something that someone really hasn't taken the time to do, whether it's gamelan music and punk, or whether it's a harpsichord and a 12-string guitar and screaming children. You gotta listen and listen and listen and listen and pay attention to everything that's happened before, and that's just so important. That covers your history, that covers your theory, your harmony, all the major stuff that I've got in my life. I was when I got my first big break in the 70s, I had played shows. I'd been playing Dixieland. I'd played with the LA Junior Philharmonic. I'd been playing Latin music, Mambos on Saturday nights, been playing the Elks Lodge accordion bands, and I was playing with the most outside group of musicians we were playing Anthony Braxton free jazz, and we were just out of our minds. And the bass player stopped and goes, "Oh, by the way, Helen Reddy's looking for a new drummer. Would you like to play with her?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "John, you read, you play your butt off, and you're incredible. Yeah, you got the gig. Oh, and she's going to be doing a TV show." So I became the house drummer on the Midnight Special. It just sort of happened, and I was in a whole nother direction. Same thing, I got called to do a movie session. One time, this friend of mine, Steve Bartek, who I played with, because you always want to play with the best musicians you can. Yeah, we just played a gig over in Hermosa Beach, and he goes, "Oh, we need a drummer for this movie we're doing, The Forbidden Zone." I played a band with Danny Elfman. I go, "Okay, great." So I played the movie, and it was really ridiculous. It was really difficult. And 4 weeks later, they came to a rock and roll show where I was playing with some of the guys from Devo and Tony Basil and all this, and they heard me playing, and they were like, "Wow, that's the guy we want to get." I wanted to be a jazz drummer. I wanted to play with Count Basie. Everybody was into Jimi Hendrix, and I was into Duke Ellington. I've always been kind of slightly off, but those opportunities came and knocked, and I was, "Yes, sir. Yeah, I'll do that right there. I'll be right there." And when I first joined Oingo Boingo, I never thought I'd be in a band called Oingo Boingo. And it was called the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo. And they did calypso tunes, early Duke Ellington. And I had to learn a gamelan piece and a balafon piece. And I'd never heard any of that kind of music. And then 2 years later, they go, so we're just going to have a rock and roll band. We'll call it Oingo Boingo. I go, okay, that's good. And you see, you never really quite know. But, you know, the more prepared you are, the more you study, the more you get into everything, any possible thing. You know, think of showing up to the most famous session, and the first thing they're going to say is, you're not this. You're failing because you're not this. Well, I went to bed every night going, I'm going to start making my own list because I never want to be there. I want to have so much fun when I play. When I go into a session, I want to be, oh yeah, mambo, sure. Polka, you bet. Punk, you got it. Can you play harder? You know I can. You know.
It's all music you can enjoy playing.
It's all music I enjoy playing.
This is a yes man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think the important thing is there's no such thing as overnight success. It's all about that preparedness to take advantage of the opportunity when it shows up on your doorstep. That's really what it's about. And then you can leverage it from there and build your career from it. It's just being in the right place, right time, and having the talent to back it up.
Doug.
You got to have
Yeah. There are exceptions.
you got to have one attitude when you're in the studio, and that simply is there are no problems, only solutions.
Beautiful. Thank you. Chris.
When you were asking about what tools, were you talking about technical tools or ability tools?
I didn't want to specify.
Okay. Because I got kind of a take
I
on,
didn't want to specify.
I've got 2 points really. We've been talking about knowledge in music and having all this different ability to play a lot of different styles, and that those are phenomenal tools, but I don't want anybody out there to be discouraged. There may be somebody, I was one of these guys who, I got into jazz and all that stuff in college, but I was never a guy that was going to be like you, who could be really great at so many styles. I was always really good at, you know, a few styles, and it's gotten me on some good projects and some good records and film scores, et cetera, aside from my day gig, my acoustics. But, you know, some of you may be sitting out there going, man, I just don't have the brain for jazz. Think about some of the most successful singers. Neil Young's a great example. You know, Neil's not doing a whole lot of intricate stuff, but I'll tell you what, he can quiet a crowd of 100,000 like nobody else. Same with people like, you know, Jackson Browne made a record by himself, went out, him and one guy. I know Jackson, I played with him, simple stuff. It's, you know, simple in a deep way, but don't be discouraged because you don't have the buzzsaw chops or because you don't have the mind to be able to play 20 different styles, and maybe you're not driven to learn all those different styles. Maybe you know 3 chords and you can do more with those 3 chords than a lot of people could do with 300. That's okay, that's good. In fact, the more meaningful music out there that's moved us all by majority are, you know, Beatles, Stones, that's not real intricate stuff. Maybe some of those guys have a lot of knowledge about other music, maybe some of them don't, but don't be discouraged. Use your tools, use what your tool set as a person is capable of. That was my first point I wanted to make, because there's so much talk about knowledge. Don't forget about the soul and what you can do with that, and minimal tools. You know, a really good builder can go out with a chainsaw and a hammer and outbuild somebody who's got a truck full of tools. Since we're talking about tools, I'm going to echo what we talked about in the first session, which is what you really need. Need a good microphone if you're going to record, and I'm going to self-promote a little bit about my speaker company. You need great speakers because you got to be able to capture it on this end and then listen to it on the other end. And everything in between, there's a whole variety of things. You know, computers, some people still use analog machines. I've got a 4-track recorder on my iPhone. For $9 you can get that app. But you got to have a microphone to capture it, and then you've got to have a good set of speakers so that you can listen back to it, and a set of speakers that tells you the truth and that doesn't tell you it's good if it's not good. And back to the acoustics. an environment that doesn't color the sound to where the speakers are not actually being true to your ear. There's a lot of things that the room is attributing to the sound that maybe is coloring it artificially. So these are all tools if you want to translate your work as an engineer or producer. You need to have a good tool set of recording and monitoring in an environment, not only for listening, but also for recording. And that would be my answer to the physical and the emotional tool set.
Great, thank you. We've walked over to the technical side. That's great. Cynthia.
I'd like to add to that. I work with a lot of creative people and a lot of creative employers in industries outside of the music industry, and I'm hearing very similar things: being versatile, being prepared, being able to say yes, being able to work hard. And one of the statements that I hear most often is people want to work with people that they like. So it's in addition to having all the talent and the skill and being truly yourself, which is absolutely critical, but to be likable. And I'm so happy to hear the comments by the member of Oingo Boingo, because that was one of my favorite bands. And you can hear by the way he talked to you, anybody would want to work with that man. I mean, think about that attitude and the liveliness. I mean, that he really illustrates that feeling that you want to have fun when you work and you want to work with people that you like.
Thank you. Laura.
Oops. To be not technologically challenged. Actually, I was going to just pretty much say what Cynthia said, which is on both sides of the coin. I've been hired because people liked being around me, and I've hired, if I've had a bunch of 5 or 10 people and some were really qualified, but then I thought, do I want to be in a room with them for 9 months, 18 hours a day? And it was like, no. So it's important. I mean, just being likable, you can, be maybe not quite as up to par, but if people like being around you, they'll hire you. And it really is a basic skill which people tend to forget about, and I think it's really, really important.
So we're emphasizing the importance of people skills, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I add something?
Vikas, and then we're going to bring it on home.
I've been in different businesses, and so I see music industry as its own, but I also see it similarities with any industry. When I had a restaurant, I had one of my best mentors was someone who sold socks. And so I saw all the similarities in these businesses. And when we're talking about the industry being kind of topsy-turvy, one thing I've found is you do have to find a way to balance within yourself. And so when all goes, crazy around you, for better or for worse, either because it's going really bad or on the flip side, it's going really good, that's also another type of craziness. Do you get sucked into the craziness and then you go crazy and your energy is like dissipating in the air? Or do you have a certain practice that keeps you centered so you can function on anywhere from 1 to 4 hours of sleep, and you have a way, whether you're in a trailer home or outside or in someone else's sofa or in your own home, to always center yourself and come with that focus to what you're doing. And I found that helped me throughout the different businesses, because whatever business I've done, when you have your own and you work for yourself, it's always crazy. It doesn't matter what you do, but usually when you work for yourself, there's crazy moments.
Thank you. The main purpose of today was to offer solutions to people looking for jobs in the music industry. What would be your best advice for places to look for work at? Are there websites? Are there doors to knock on? Are there people to speak to? Hands to shake? Where should these people go? Doug.
I'd like to pitch in from the standpoint of being a record producer, and you have to come up with an idea to keep yourself employed. This may not affect the overall picture of what everybody's looking for, but you'll find when you're listening to people and going on the internet, there's a general dissatisfaction today with white lighting. Everybody works under white lights. They come home, the first thing they do is in a bathroom, white lights, kitchen, white lights. There's a general movement for an ambience, change ambience. Some people put on music, some people put on sounds. I mean, years ago, I had a marvelous run with Mystic Moods. I put sound effects and sold platinum after platinum with it, you know. Sound of horses on the beach, and songs took the melody line off and just played the background. Actually, I saved an LP. The girl lost her voice, so I didn't have any voice, so I put sound effects on it. Sold platinum. So, see, happens. Well, it happened to me also, if you want to joke like that, in the 50s. The organist, Dave Baby Cortez, lost his voice, and he was singing. She said, I can play the organ, Doug. Let's make something up on the organ. I said, okay, let's go. He said, I can only play in C, so everybody had to play in C. He was doing shortening bread. I called it the happy organ. I sold $1 million #1 in 1958. So things, it's a question of if you have the ability, turn your mind onto what's going on. Right now, there's a huge market for sound effects, which digital plays a big part in. Lighting, digital. People want to get home and change their atmosphere. They want to be away from, and you can't always run around the corner to a cafe now and hear somebody playing an acoustic guitar, sit back, have a coffee. You can't do that. These days are changing. You are off the freeway where you're all reared up. You're home, you got the white lights again, you're back at work. Start to turn your mind into what people want and supply it. We may not have an industry distributing sound effects, I don't know if there are, or gift shops, but people want sound effects. There's a huge market out there for a change of atmosphere. Help.
It's a service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Where else can we go for jobs?
Yeah, I'd feel a little guilty not chiming in this whole time with any advice, but I think there's a lot of ways to get to what you want, but as far as what I can tell you is if you work above and beyond of what you could learn at school or even on your own, just like stay up at night learning Pro Tools or learning analog equipment, anything that may not seem relevant at the time, but down the road might be relevant. It can never hurt to have too much knowledge on something. And as far as getting into the business, I mean, there's a bunch of ways, but when I was in high school, I got a job doing shipping for a plug-in company for Pro Tools. And from there, I mean, I got deals in software and stuff, which is cool. And from there, I went into being like the product specialist and teaching people how to use the software. And then even helping design, they made auto-tune, tunes vocals. So I got to have a hand in like, hey, this would be cool if this had this, or, you know, it'd be a lot easier. And from there, it just, everything leads to another. So if you just keep pushing forward and have a good attitude about it, like it'll bring you where you want to go, I think.
How did you get your job in the shipping department?
It's funny. I was in a band, and we wanted to rent they had a hardware piece for vocal tuning because we had some background singers who were pretty rough. And so they're like, well, we don't rent it, but you know, there's this guitar showcase. It was up in Northern California. Rents the product. So we're like, oh, okay, we'll go there. And he's like, oh, by the way, do you know anyone that would be into shipping? Or because we need someone in the back. And we're like, oh, no, not right now. We're busy during school. But then in the summertime, I called him back. I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. I noticed, you know, they're in the same area. So it worked out. But.
So it's a good idea to look in the area.
Well, yeah. Someone said
the
earlier session, don't be afraid to make phone calls. Like, I don't know, a lot of people have ideas like, oh, I can't call that company. You know, they're the #1 selling plugin of all time. Like, why would I call them? And they're just normal people, and they're like, yeah, I'll give you a job, whatever.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Make the phone call, right? We'll go here. Oh, let's go to Rob first, and then we'll come back.
A couple places that, as far as live mixing, that people get jobs that have come through the theaters have been with youth theaters. They've just had a brother or sister that's been there, and they've actually gotten on the sound crew and actually gotten to a point where they've amassed a lot of knowledge about live mixing. Also churches. A lot of churches now have praise bands or worship bands, and they have crews where people actually get a chance to mix live sound every Sunday and then during rehearsals. And also another really good resource, I think, is actually, you're already here at school. We have a relationship with Miracosta, and I'm sure they've got relationships with other people.
That's
and
the
we hire a
California
lot
Center
of,
for the Arts.
yeah, the California Center for the Arts. We hire interns. Some of our interns come through Miracosta, and we've had interns that one of them, I think, is now in mixing or recording engineer in Nashville. So we've had people that have come through Miracosta, come through us, learned a bit, and moved on and gone farther off into the business. So definitely your networking skills. I mean, there are people all around you probably that might have heard about a job out there, and if you just keep talking to people, you'll hear about them.
Okay, we'll end with Craig here.
Well, I just wanted to encourage the students to make sure, keep your mind open, that there's a lot of ways to make a living in the industry. And I don't know how many of you are artist bound. If that's the pie in the sky for you to be the rock star or an artist, that's awesome. Follow your passion, do all that kind of stuff. It's also good to, have a life. And there are a lot of ways. You've heard a lot of them here today. And for me, I was supposed to be a rock star by the time I was 22. I'm 46 now. And when I was 29, I just tell a story real quick. I was with a band that got signed. We were up in LA, fell apart, classic story. Got a job at West LA Music. And I had been doing sessions and recording for quite a while. And I learned how to use the Lindrum when it first came out and was pretty quick on it. So I was doing jingles and the Drum Cat, which is a trigger interface for drummers. Anyway, a guy came in one day and it happened to be a percussionist going out on a big pop tour, and he didn't know how to program the thing. I just went over, just wanted to meet the guy, hung out, programmed for him. I'm at his house and listening to these multi-tracks and going, wow, that's Janet Jackson. This is like 93. I get a call a week later and I'm on the road. I never thought I would be a tech. And as a matter of fact, at that point in my life, I would have thumbed my nose at a tech. So try to tell the story real quick. I get out on the road, tour the world for 18 months, and I realized I like the tech people better than the musos, than the musicians. I'm still a musician. I've had a really good career playing sessions and doing all that, but I love that side of the industry, and it's so important. And the one thing you got to keep in mind, man, it's like when you look at the musicians, they come and go on these tours, and they're usually all about the same age, especially on the pop tours. They're right around 23, 25. But the guys that are good at what they do, the support crew, they are there year after year. I've got a friend, Terry Lawless. He's playing keys with U2. He's 54 years old. Started with Barry Manilow, pushing his piano out onto the stage. Great programmer, monster programmer, keyboard player, sax player. Now he's getting writing credits with the band. He's a rock star. Nobody even knows who he is. And he's a crew guy, and it's rad because it's a real job, man. There's nothing wrong with being a support person. So if you can check your ego about being the artist as you go along, it's okay to make a living. There's no shame in like supporting a family and all that. So anyway.
I think that's great. So there is hope for us who want to have a normal lifestyle in music. This is great.
Yeah.
So we'd like to open up the microphone over there for questions from the audience. Would anyone like to come forward and ask our illustrious panel here any questions? Please come forward. Are you afraid?
No time to be shy now. Lock the doors.
Please come up. Thank you.
I know for like someone that's looking to be a recording engineer, I know I'm taking a class here currently. It's a second semester class. And there's a couple of other schools, trade schools, that I've seen a lot lately advertised in magazines and stuff for recording. That is like a specific trade school. How would that compare to doing something like an internship where you're saving, the $20,000, $25,000?
Save your money, in my opinion. And it's more like $80,000. Kids come out.
Yeah, they're pretty expensive schools.
Yeah, okay. There's of course, there's going to be stars that come out of any of those schools, but if you're serious about it, you're gonna put the time in on your own, little rig at home. Go get an internship, and for God's sake, don't be like some interns that show up and wait to be told what to do. If there's downtime at the studio, you don't have to be cleaning the toilets like everybody freaks out about. You could be whipping out the manuals and maybe teaching the engineer how to use that new plug-in that he doesn't know how to use that he bought because he's too busy working. You know what I mean? Be proactive about the opportunities you have, and you know, I think an internship's the way to go. There's a few good studios in the county, and interns are hard to come by, really good ones. I would say 1 in 20 are worth keeping. So.
Yeah, I would agree. Just, you know, an internship is invaluable. You're going to learn so much more on the job. But the trick in being a good intern is knowing when to speak up and knowing when to be quiet. You know, there's a lot of time you're just going to be studying and waiting on hand to be called to do something. But there are times when if you step up, you can actually contribute to whatever's going on. And from there, you forge all those relationships. Make sure people know who you are when you're in there, because as soon as you leave, suddenly you have a little network, and those people move on, and that's all part of it.
I just add that nobody's going to ask you where you went to school or what degrees you have when you get into it. They want to know if you can do the job. And I do a lot of stuff with video, and I was recently talking to a major cinematographer, and he said, yeah, we have great people on our staff who don't have a high school education, but they are amazing at what they do. So put yourself a portfolio together and show people that you know how to do the job. You can have a PhD, nobody would care.
Can I add? I always suggest because when you get into the audio tech, I mean, you just want to slobber over buying all this stuff. I mean, I refuse to look in the catalogs anymore. And so students always say, what do I need? And I always say, work with what you have. And when you get to a point where you've truly, absolutely cannot move forward, then maybe think about investing. But that means borrowing, using, putting together, piecing together, using school resources. Then as you move up into what you need because you've exercised all options, then you'll actually value that next piece of equipment or that other education that you pay for. But obviously it's their job to sell you stuff, so they'll get you real excited that if you pay for this, it will profit and benefit you. But if you don't earn your way into it, you're not going to value it anyways. So paying X amount of money for gear or an education, if you haven't worked your way into it and can really appreciate the extra stuff it has to offer you, then it's not going to benefit you. You can do a lot with the 4-track and learn a lot with the 4-track before you go out and spend a ton of money on a ton of gear.
Wes?
I was just going to say the same thing. I think that, you know, maybe a good school name or those kinds of things might help you get